All right, Two Planker Podcasts. We got a special guest today, Kieran McVeigh. What's up, dude?
Not much, man. How are you?
Good. So I'm here at X Games right now, doing my thing.
Yeah.
A little under the weather, so everyone, I apologize for the voice. But I wanted to get this done because I've always wanted to do like a "Where in the World is so and so," like somebody we haven't heard from in years. And you're like the perfect person to start with because every couple, I'd say like 2 times a year, maybe, or maybe every year, someone posts a thread on New Schoolers and they're like, "Where is Kieran McVeigh?" So we tracked you down. So I mean, let's get right to it. Where have you been at for years, dude?
For the last couple of years, I've been in the Boston area doing like research and grad school stuff. But really, what happened is I like towards the end of like where people knew where I was. Like I don't even know what year that was. I had started going to college, and basically I just had like one or two injuries that combined with like being in college, and I was in college in SoCal, and so it wasn't like the most conducive place to be skiing a lot. Uh, you know, I just sort of fell off and like went from like full on skier trying to ski all the time. Like my first year in college, I was skiing like 5 days a week, but from the LA area. And then, I got one or two injuries, all like shoulder dislocations. And then I just transitioned to like being fully in the ski scene to just like having more and more friends at college. So that's like, the like, I don't know what happened, but I think I think part of the reason people always have that question is it was such an abrupt, like one year I felt like, I was kind of on the come up, still like emerging almost in the scene. And the next year I was just gone, had like one or two shots, one or two edits, and then there was nothing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, a lot of other, like a lot of people have gone like, done different things, but they're more of like a fade to black, whereas I just like cut to black, and so I feel like it kept people wondering more.
It's so ridiculous, dude. And then I saw you in an edit. I think it was like the Tall T Dan Rail Jam recap, and you have like one clip in it from last year. I was like, did anybody else see? Like that's him right there. It's so funny.
Yeah. That's like been one of the cool parts about coming back to the East Coast. It's like, I'm from Vermont. And so particularly after I'd been here for like a year or two, I started going home and skiing a little bit more. And it's like, I'd go back to Sugarbush and see everyone. But then Tall T would like kind of call me up sometimes and be like, "Yo, come out." And he was trying to, I think last year, a few times he hit me up and was like, "Oh, we're coming to Boston. You should come hit some spots with us." But now it's like, I ski so little that I would be deathly afraid to just go out and try and hit urban,
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so I mean, we'll continue on this track for people that know you, but people that don't know you are probably so confused what we're talking about. Yeah. But so you also were in Alabama for a little while. Is that what I think Dan said that?
Yeah, that's right. So I went to college in SoCal. And then after I graduated, I did this like fellowship, which is kind of like, do you know what Teach for America is?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, except for startups. And so it's like, the capitalist version of Teach for America. But so through that, I ended up getting a job in Alabama and was living in Birmingham, it was like the most random place. And I was definitely like, really scared to move there. And like, I had all my friends from college were just making so much fun of me, like being like, Alabama is like the worst place to move. But I loved it actually. Like I had made so many good friends from both people that lived there and then people that were in the same program. And it was just so nice, like being in kind of a small city. Like you're from Connecticut, right?
Connecticcut, yeah.
Where in Connecticut did you grow up?
I'm from Burlington, Connecticut, so right by Ski Sundown.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. I don't know how much time you spent in cities, but my experience was essentially like growing up in rural Vermont, and then like going to LA for college, but I wasn't really like fully in the thick of it in LA. But then it was like, oh, a city can also be like Birmingham, where it's like, under 1 million people. You can get anywhere in like 15 minutes in a car. And it was just like super livable in a lot of ways. Although it's a city with a lot of problems too. But like you can, I was insulated from those in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, I'll share a story with you. So I'm also like Burlington is rural Connecticut, and I took a job one time. It was a part-time job, just like a gig. That required me to move to Jackson, Mississippi for like 3 or 4 months. So I did the same thing as you, just moved down to just some dump down south,
Yeah.
and you learn a lot down there. Like, but I would not settle there ever.
Yeah. Well, I'm positive on Birmingham. I'm like, it's a city with problems, but like, I'm like, if there were a surf break somewhere around Birmingham, I would happily move back there, like for the rest of my life, probably.
Damn, you're up on it. That's crazy.
Yeah. Just only good memories from there, really.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, so now I'll give my perception of you before we tell people who you are.
Yeah.
So, like around 2013, you were popping off, and at the time, I'm a 15-year-old living in Connecticut, and you're like a regional legend there, like you got New England locked down. So this is what I remember. I remember the hoodie over the helmet. I remember no poles ever. And I could just, in like my mind's eye, I could see you doing like a tail press, and I could see the Nordica logo under your skis, like a fisheye shot of a tail press, and I could see the Nordica. And and it's just wrapped up with all the other memories of like the YMR videos, Liam McKinley, the GOAT filmer. So
that's what I was gonna say. It's like half of that is like due to Liam, because he was, it was just like really lucky for all of us that like Liam was there and like making those videos, and because that really helped all of us. But I think everything you said is more or less like spot on of what I was doing and what it was.
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. Like, so you're from Vermont. You're from rural Vermont. Yep. Give us a little bit of the Kieran backstory.
Yeah, so I'm from Vermont. I grew up like neither of my parents really skied, and I grew up actually snowboarding. Like I started snowboarding like pretty young, at like 7 or 8. Snowboarded for like 5 years or something, and then for whatever reason, like during the summer, I like found some videos on the internet or something, but of ski blading, like or like what's the word they call it? It's something else. It's not like snowblading. It's like ski boarding. I think is what the like people that are in that call it. And I got really hyped on that. Bought a pair of those like on the internet over the summer. Started doing that, and then for like a couple, like the first half of a season when I was in like 6th grade or something. And then I distinctly remember I was riding up the lift with someone who I didn't know at the time, but Sumner Fisher, who was like it was a filmer like back in the day, also from Vermont, but then was out in Utah for a while. And we didn't know each other. And he was just bashing on me for having the ski blades. Like he's like, these things are so whack. And then I just like remember getting off the lift and being like, damn, like I gotta get skis. Like, this is dumb. I shouldn't be on these anymore. And so I switched to skiing. And then after that, I was just like pretty much fully hooked and like stoked on skiing. And, grew up skiing Sugarbush, Stowe for a couple of years. Could
you describe the Sugarbush scene when you were growing up? Because I'm very familiar with the current scene, but like, who were the heads that were there at the time?
Yeah. So I think it was like, I think of a couple people. One is Tony Chuchulo or whoever, was like the terrain park manager, or started to be the terrain park manager. Because like it wasn't like a crazy scene when I was like 13, 14, 15. But then Tony really got it going. and like brought a lot of people in, brought a lot of investment, like made the park sick. And then also, like, you know, there's a bunch of other park guys still doing it, like Trevor, I think his last name is Borelli, who's still there, is like, you know, helped make the park sick. But it wasn't like the full crew, you know, now. But a few of the like people, like when I was a kid, it was like the sickest skiers at Sugarbush were like, they were all on VT North pro shops. Like, I don't know if you've ever been around there. It's like at the base of Lincoln Peak, which is not where the park is. That's the park's at Mount Ellen. And so like you'd see that they had like embroidered jackets and stuff. And I was like, oh, like VT North pro shops. Like, that's so sick. So like one person I really remember is Jack Stouse, who also like moved to Utah, went to Westminster. He was like someone I really looked up to when I was a kid. But then it was also like, there were it was a really strong like snowboard scene before the ski scene kind of popped off. Like, it's still a pretty strong snowboard scene. But so then it was like, and I actually rode like a, you know, like Vermont public transport bus from the high school one down over from mine to Sugarbush, like every like weekend and vacation day in the winter. And I was like pretty lucky that there were 2 or 3 like really sick snowboarders that rode that bus too. And so that's like Jeff DeForge and Charlie Maythorpe, who were like older, you know, a couple years older than me, but went to high school with me. So that was like a big influence, you know, like these older snowboarders. And so that's like the scene, you know. It was just like, it wasn't that like so crazy developed, but it was like a lot of snowboarders sort of emerging. And that's all when I'm like, you know, middle school through high school, early high school. And then like maybe in my junior and senior year of high school, that's when it's like starts, a lot of the characters who you might associate with like the early days of Sugarbush start emerging. Like Connor Gata, he might have been there before, but I didn't really know him before then. And then like Liam and them, they're all skiing there. Like Franchino's coming up more. And then like Tall T Dan's around a lot more. Or that's like really when I started knowing him. And then like PJ, who's still there, and he's like runs the parks now, does a lot of that. He's skied for a little bit, but now he snowboards. He's like early days Weimar. That's like when that scene started really going. But it felt like my senior year of high school, so that would have been like 2012. That's like, you know, that crew was still really tight. It was like a ton of snowboarders and then like a few skiers, but like we all knew each other. And then I feel like the years after that, like that year was the year we did Sugarbush Sundays, which I feel like really helped us all out in terms of like gaining a little bit of notoriety.
Well, there's actually a funny, so in one of those threads, like Where's Kieran, Dan has a great comment. He's like, here's some great Kieran edits. If you want to see more, just watch the second half of any Sugarbush Sunday. Like you were that good that it was like taking up like a lot of the video.
Well, it was also like my own self-promotion in a way. I kind of like tried to convince Liam to do that. I was like, oh, we should do like a weekly edit series, Sugarbush Sundays. So it was, you know, I was pushing for it too, you know what I mean?
So you weren't even the best. Also, you were just in the filmer's ear the whole time.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So you're putting out those videos. What else is going on?
I mean, that's like, so.
Well, Ian Compton's there making the week, if it's around the same time period that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Ian Compton is there, but he's like, he's more of like, it's like we had a crew that was like 2012. So that year I was, my second half of the year, that was my senior year of high school. I was homeschooled and like kind of graduated early / homeschooled to like try and look a little bit better for like college admissions, essentially, and not be like, oh, I'm out, you know, like I still care about school. Yeah. And it was like we had a crew that was there like pretty much every day, and that's like me, Connor Gata, Liam, PJ. And then Compton's like dropping by occasionally, but he was all over the place too, you know, so he was at Mount Snow. So he was there. And that was that. And so that's like that year. And that's when I feel like I really started to pop off. And it's like the year or two before that, I had also been skiing at Stowe. And so they were skiing like, I don't know if you know, like Ben Bruno, who's like another, like, you know, like he's like probably way before your time, but for me, it's like East Coast legend. He's like, you know, he's coached a lot of people over the years. Like he was Tanner Rainville's coach, Max Gorham's coach. He probably coached Duncan Adams for some point. Like all the Stowe kids, he coached for a little bit, I think. So I was skiing with them at Stowe, and then like when Sugarbush kind of like the park started popping up, I went back over there. So that's part of the context. And then I think the other like main thing that was going on for me that year was I was going up to Quebec to film with like the ESK media. I don't know if you remember any of that.
It's probably buried in the memory somewhere.
Yeah. And so like I'd go up and film with them, you know, occasionally that year, but it would be like they were I think Nicholas Broussard was like their main filmer, and he had just like hit me up after I made finals at Rails to Riches one of those years. Cause like, I don't know, do they still do Rails to Riches now?
I don't think so.
Yeah. But that was like another really big East Coast thing, you know, of like, oh, like Rails to Riches.
Do you want to talk about Rails to Riches a little bit? Because that is such a big event that I feel like just like you just vanished off the face of the earth, and everyone's just like, what the hell happened to that? Like, do you want to talk about like how important it was? Because there were so many big names that are still big that competed in that and won throughout the years.
Yeah, totally. It's almost, so like Rails to Riches was you know, it's a big rail jam at Killington, like pretty early season, always way down at the base, and it had like pretty big cash prizes, like I don't know, a couple grand, like I can't exactly remember, but it was like more than that. It was kind of like bragging rights and like culturally important. And it's like you get, you know, like a good like 50% of like all the best rail skiers, you know, like Will Wesson would go every year, LJ would go every year.
Steve Stepp.
Steve Stepp, Kai Krepola won 1 year, Franchino won 1 year. And it's like, oh, the Dedalis would always go, particularly when they were more like East Coast based. And it was like a kind of who's like proving ground of like rail skiing on the East Coast. But yeah, and then it's just sort of faded. I think it's actually a similar thing because I know, I'm going to forget her last name, but I know for a long time there was an events manager at Killington, and her first name was Tess. I don't remember, Tess Hobbs maybe? Yeah. I could be completely wrong, but my sense is that once she left, and I think she went to like maybe Woodward at Tahoe.
Yeah.
I think once she left, like it might have fallen off a little bit, but also it seems like a lot of those events kind of fell off. So I don't know if it's exactly that.
It's insane. Like we saw the same thing at Ski Sundown with Jared Moss. Not to diss the guys currently running the Ski Sundown Park, but it's like some people have such a big impact that you just completely take for granted until they're gone, and you're like, damn, they're not here pushing for that anymore, and all of a sudden this thing that we loved is just gone forever. Because like it was, you know, it was their baby.
Totally, dude. And I think it's like, you know, I was talking about Tony, the terrain park manager at Sugarbush, like when I was like in high school and before. And it was like, he just, you know, he actually passed away a couple of years ago. I don't exactly know what happened, but I was like reflecting on that. And I was like, damn, like this dude really made something that like, and like made a community that's still going and had such a like positive impact on my life and so many other people's lives. And I was like, you know, that's awesome. And I you know, I just was just feeling super thankful. And so I think it's like, you know, that made me think, and it's something I've talked about with like Talkie before, where it's like, not exactly this, but where you're like, you know, you can make a really big impact in like the skiing community. And it's kind of like, you know, from the outside, it's like, oh, it's free skiing. It's like kind of like, I don't know, it's just these like privileged rich kids or like whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But it's like if you have a big positive impact on everyone's like all these people's lives, then I think like, you know, it's not you're not Mother Teresa, but it's just like a good thing. And so like thinking about Tony and then all these other people that have like made these like places and experiences that were super important for me, I'm like, oh, I this is just a good thing. And I think that, you know, on a slightly filled note, it's like seeing the more kind of community focused that from the outside, like I'm not in the free skiing community really at all anymore. But seeing that, I'm like, oh, this is a good development. Like, and I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it. I don't know. I forget who I saw post this, what I heard, but like there really is something to like being a part of a community, like recognizing a community, becoming part of it, and then having an impact on that community that you can see, no matter how small it is. It doesn't matter.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's so
100%.
good for you to do that. And then like who cares if like if you're not Mother Teresa, exactly. Like
Yeah, totally.
there will be people that remember you for the rest of their life because of the impact that you had on a community that you shared together. And like
Totally.
how fulfilling is that? That's great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And like totally that for me growing up, you know, like
Yeah.
that's where I spent like all my free time in the winter. And so like it was, yeah, it's like, who knows where I would be, what I'd be doing. I think I'd just be doing something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it was great. Like, and I feel thankful to have that.
Yeah. Dude, I just remember being down in Connecticut watching all the videos you guys would put up. And we're going to address the elephant in the room. We'll say this once. This just shows how the times have changed. YMR, the ski crew, Young
yeah.
Money Retarded is what it stood for. That shows how far everything's come. Yeah, so YMR, with the most ridiculous name for any ski crew, you guys were putting out, like, honestly, like some cultural gems that have mostly been lost to Vimeo blowing up. But I just remember like loving these videos, and it's so funny because you guys were only like, you know, like 5 years older than me. But I was like, these guys are like superheroes, you know,
Dude.
Yeah, like celebrities. But in reality, it's like, oh, this has like probably like a couple thousand views on it. It's all like New England kids.
Dude, it's like, so people will, I mean, so it's funny you talk about it like that because people will like occasionally, it's like once or twice a year, people will like find a thread about me on News School. It's like unrelated. People that like don't know I skied, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you're famous!" And I was like a hyper local celebrity. You know, it was probably like 2,000 kids, but like to those 2,000 kids, I was like a big deal. You know, and it's just funny how it works like that. But yeah, well, I was certainly not involved in naming that, but you know, I think it is just like no one would call it that now, and it's like it's a relic of the times, and we should have called it something better. But yeah, it is what it is.
I think it was the perfect name for what you guys were. It's the perfect name. So I don't know. You want to talk about YMR at all? Like just how that crew came together, what those guys ended up doing. I mean, it's just it's a lot of names that people will recognize that they might not realize. Like all were at the same place at the same time.
Totally. I mean, I think the thing is, I was more of a tertiary member, like, and more of like a later member. Yeah. To me, that was like a like Killington focused crew that like came out like kind of like, to me the most central people I think of that is like Talty, Franchino, Charlie Dayton. Liam was totally in it in the beginning, and so like PJ was there too. And then I'm not like, are there other names you're remembering? Because those are like the people that really
everything is
stick out
just
to me.
blended together, like Jeremy Velu, just Germ. You got Sheldon Donatelli running around in
Well,
Vermont.
okay, I think that's like the later. That's like
Okay,
once
yeah.
they've all moved to
The
Bear.
bear, it's
That's
a bear
like
with Dan.
originally it's like more Killington focused, and then and then all those guys, maybe Sheldon was in it a little bit more because those were always more like Southern Vermont guys who I didn't know that well at all, really, until like they all moved to Bear and I was in LA, but like till everyone moved to California. But yeah, that was definitely it, like when all those guys were living in the house in Bear. That was it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan. I already asked Dan about YMR, and I think he set the record straight on what turned into what, and like who was it, because he made his whole series, the Tall Tea Tuesdays, and that documented all of that. But for me, that's just all blended together. It's like, oh, this is what the older kids are up to, and they're so sick.
Totally. Dude. It's also so funny because I remember like thinking about. Now I'll like a couple years doesn't seem like anything. But when you're like 13 and someone's like 16, it was just like such a big gap. And you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And then the thing I would always think about when I was a kid, because I was like, essentially competitive. So I'd be like, oh, if I'm 13 now and they're 16, like how much better do I have to get to be able to like do that stuff when I'm 16? But yeah. So it's funny how like, now that you're a little bit older, it's like doesn't matter almost, and it's
just
like
so funny, like just the perception of it. Because now I look at like high schoolers, and I'm like, oh, you guys are all one entity, but you see so much. You see everything different when you're that age.
Yeah, totally. And it's like I'm like 30 now.
Yeah.
And I work with college students like all the time because I'm a grad student, and so it's just like so funny being like, interacting with these kids who are like 12 years younger than me, but also just in such a different stage of life. Like it's not 100% the age gap. It's just like, just like the things you're thinking about in college are just not the things you're thinking about, like, 10 years out of college or whatever, 8 years or whatever.
Yeah. Dude. All right. I want to transition this because when people talk about you online, they talk about you pioneering the fat park skis, and I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think you're a pioneer for fat park skis?
So I was thinking about questions like this because you hit me up to come on, and I was like, oh, what are some like questions I might get? So like fat park skiers, I think it was really like Idea. Have you seen Idea?
Idea. It's a movie I recognize the name of, but
okay, so it's Eric Iberg filmed it.
2007.
Like Andy Mayer, Eric Pollard, and Pep Fujas, and like they're all like riding no poles, fat pow skis in the park. They're all riding like hellbents in the park. And then there's a lot of backcountry stuff, and I feel like that's like the origin of fat park skis. I mean, there's probably like a few things that you could point to before, but I think that's like the thing that made me think to do that. So I don't know. I think it's like with any of these things where it's like, I was probably one of the earlier people that was like dedicated sort of like fat, like 100 millimeters underfoot and like rocker park ski on the East Coast. Cause it's like, I don't know if it's impractical, but it wasn't done that much at the time. There were probably some other people doing it. But I can, pretty clearly be like, oh, like Idea kind of got me on that. And then also like, I think seeing like some of the like Mount Snow guys who were in Mammoth, like kind of like Montage. Have you heard of Montage? That crew?
Yeah.
Okay, so Montage was a crew out of Mammoth that was all like southern Vermont to Mammoth. And so it was all like the early guys were all like Nolan Willard, Kevin Malone, Chris Logan, Stu Halverson. There's probably a few more. And half of those guys are like coaches at MHSSC, which is how I like, I know a lot of them decently well, although I haven't talked to them forever. But then it's also like Nick Miles, Chris Logan, and Parker White were all like Montage affiliated because Sean Logan, Chris Logan's older brother, was in Montage. Dude, it's so funny how everyone like names their crews.
It's so great.
I would see those guys riding fatter skis in the park, and part of it was like it was spring in Mammoth, so it was like slushy. But so that was like, pointed to it for me too, and so I don't know. It's like when you can think about where your influences were coming from, you're like, I don't really feel like I pioneered that. It's just like all these guys were already doing it out west, and then I, it's like, oh, I want to do that style of skiing on the East Coast or whatever.
Well, dude, just apart from the skis themselves, apart from the gear, your style of skiing and also your fit, like the hood over the helmet, is iconic. Like, it's you just by seeing any clip in a video, even without, any context.
Yeah.
But I don't think, and this is not an insult because you're a great skier, but I don't think I've ever seen you do anything more than a 270 out of a rail. Like, your tricks were always super buttery, super surface, and just like slow and nice and just pressed out. So like, why was that your style? Like, why is that what you ended up gravitating towards?
I couldn't tell you. I could tell you some things that certainly like influenced it. Like, I think definitely. idea was like a big influence. I also think that I think it was probably a combination of like those like early Montage guys. Like, at some point we were probably at MHSSC and they were like, something like, like hopping switch ups is whack. And then I also think I forget the name of them, but there were these really early like gibberish edits, like Day in the Park at Breck or something like that.
Yeah, I remember those.
And it had like Adam DeWarn in it, and he was like, because I think he was the original like only surface swapper.
Yeah.
And at some point I was like, like I'm never hopping my switch ups, like I just want to be doing that. And I think that this like slow rotations, I think a lot of that was idea influenced. And then I think you just start like, it's like anything else. You start like getting into that thing and you're like exploring it. And you're just getting like more and more stoked on it. And I think I was also like, although I wouldn't have thought about it this way at the time. Like, at the time, I think I would have been like, oh, I just think this is like the sickest way to ski or whatever. I think part of it is I was like kind of building a brand in my head, like, oh, this is how I ski, like really excited about that. But also like sort of as a differentiating thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, I think like another skier that I grew up watching with a very distinct style was Lupe, and I feel like you guys have very similar styles. Like, I think that your tail press and his tail press are the two best tail presses, and they're kind of similar because you guys are super low and like a super late rotation, but they are different. Like, when you watch them, like Lupe's is definitely different from yours, but he comes to mind as someone that like has, like, you see his skiing, you're like, yeah, that's him.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's, maybe. I also think like in the other, I feel like Lupe and I both kind of came up in the era when like you like wanted your arms down while skiing, and there was like a real emphasis on like smoothness, and that was like really good style, like being really smooth and like still, almost. They're just like super casual. Whereas now I think it's like, there's like sections of skiers that have that style, but it's a lot more like varied, like
it's all over the place now. Like you could see.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Lupe and I maybe were both products of that. And we had like a little bit of that, like, really going for like a certain nonchalance.
Yeah, yeah. Like just like, oh yeah, like the whole style just has the whole like whatever attitude to it. Like, yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like what it communicates. It's like, yeah, who cares? It's like no big deal. This isn't hard. Like, whatever.
It was like a little bit like because that was really like spin to win era. You know what I mean? Like that was, I feel like, I could be wrong, but a lot of that era was like when a lot of the like super spinny tricks were like starting to get popular.
Yeah, it's like Bobby Brown, like 1620 at X Games, and everyone's like, "Whoa, my God, can you believe someone can spin that much?"
And like also on like like
oh yeah, and like Tom's putting out like the 4x9 where he does, it's like a 12, like his cumulative spin is like a 1260 on a box, and it's like there's a lot of spinning going on.
And it was like when like elusives were like really cool. Like that was like, oh shit, like that's a really like sick rail trick. And so I think part of it's like a little bit like in response to that of being like, nah, it's not just all about spinning.
Yeah, that's so sick. And yeah, I think that's why people refer to you as like a pioneer for that style, because like you were like, yeah, you were, I'm trying to think of a word other than pioneer, but like you were the guy doing it, and you were like,
yeah, I think it was the right, but it's also like, I think that like definitely Henrik and B-Dog were like right there. They were probably just overall more talented, so they had like a broader repertoire.
They were known for other things.
In my lane.
So a lot of great edits. I mean, there's an insane clip. I'm going to post this on the Instagram of a switch nose butter down the stairs at Sugar Bush. That's just so, it's disgusting. It might be from the new Intel edit, or I saw a GIF of it. I gotta find the actual edit. But so let's talk about this. Let's talk about one last thing at Sugar Bush before we really branch off, because there's a whole other side of things. So what was up with your involvement with Nordica? Because at the time, it's like we're talking about another one of these influential people. Evan Williams made Nordica super, super cool for a period of time. And,
totally.
And you were right in the mix of all that. So you want to talk about Nordica a little bit in that era?
Yeah. I was actually thinking Evan Williams would be like a sick person for you to have on here. Because he would have the, just the full like ski industry perspective that I feel like I don't really even have. So Nordica, I got on Nordica at like maybe end of 2012 something, and it was essentially like I think Evan Williams had just graduated from St. Mike's, and just like probably through, because he had been like a sponsored skier for Line, but I was also like obviously doing the new Intel stuff, and so probably just through that sort of like ski industry connections, he got hired as the team manager for Nordica. And I don't know exactly like how it all went down, but he, I think, was essentially like, he's like managing the full team. I think at some point they had, I think Nordica's like strategy had been more like big comp skiers. So like they had TJ Schiller and Alex Schlope, and he definitely dropped Alex Schlope at some point, maybe 1 year after I'd been on there, or something. But so he's like freeing up a lot of budget essentially. But he also had, he built out like a grassroots team, and that's like what Lupe got on. Sheldon was on that. Sam Parker was on that. Like a few other people were on that, but that's like kind of like, that's what I feel like Line, who I, was previously sponsored by, they do super well. Like they have a big, or at least at the time, like a big grassroots program. But so Evan got on, made that. and then it was just like kind of like someone that like really knew what was up, like had some influence in the company, and like, you know, did some of the rebranding, like the block logo that we all like had the hoodies for, but just was able to get like the cool team and put out some cool edits. And he's like, you know, Evan's like one of the original like great edit filmers. And so he was also able to like leverage that essentially. And then like, you know, like Compton eventually ends up on Nordica because Evan knows them, and just all these things. And it's like, it's kind of like the, you know, a playbook for making a ski brand cool. Like you get some like sort of smaller names on there and you have some money to do some like kind of bigger projects.
Well, they did that insane project that I feel like has just been completely lost to time. It was the K2 versus Nordica like bus challenge thing that Free Skier put on. I was trying to think, okay, this is what it was. I was looking it up earlier. I could not find it. It was Free Skier, K2 versus Nordica. Road trip challenge. Yes. Dude, this is like, were you involved with that at all? I don't think you were on that, were you?
I was on it.
You were? Okay.
That's Free Skier had done that before. Like years
way
before.
back. Yeah.
But so they did that. But I think that was all, I have no idea who funded that, but it was like Free Skier put on, but it was maybe just like whatever two companies were willing to like put up some money for it. Who knows?
Dude, but, I'm so glad that you mentioned that it was Free Skier because I could not remember for the life of me who put it on. Like I was looking it up. I'm like what? Who hosted this? Because I remember it was K2 versus Nordica. So you were in that.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude. Okay, you gotta tell people about this because this shit's ridiculous, and it's like it's so fun, and they like it's just it's outrageous. So feel free.
Essentially it's like King of the Road in Thrasher, kind of, where you have like a list of challenges that are like both ski related and not ski related. So like I'm trying to remember, like one of them was like chug a pint of maple syrup.
There was like get a tattoo, like do a backflip over the van, tattoo,
all this stuff. And then you know, it's two teams in these RVs for a week, and you're just like filming everything, just like any sort of reality TV show. Dude, and I've actually never watched it to this day because when it came out, I was like so embarrassed, just like couldn't stand the thought of like watching myself do these challenges.
Do you remember the teams? Because the teams were insane. Like there were some big names on these teams.
Well, I think, dude, both teams actually. So the Nordic team was me, Dale, and Compton, and then I think Evan Williams was our filmer, and then Peter Cirilli, who's a photographer.
Yeah.
Hank Lampert, who's like a free skier guy, but it's like a crazy personality. But then the K2 team is like just as, if not more stacked, and it's like Clayton Dilla, Sanjay, and then is it Max Gorham?
I gotta see. Yeah, Max Gorham. Yeah.
Was he the last?
I believe so. Yeah, he was the last one. Yeah, it was 3 versus 3.
Dude, yeah. And it's like, because that was also the year, it was a year after I like met all those guys in Colorado. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's always like when you're a kid, like, you know, it's like that would be like the craziest dream ever. But then it's like, once you get there, it's like, oh, it's sick. And it's like just an absurd experience, but it's also like, oh, these are just all my friends, you know, like,
yeah,
me and like used to sleep in the same room for like every summer at Hood. And so it's like, oh yeah. So it's crazy. But yeah, it's one of those moments of just like being like, oh damn, like, you know, this is kind of living the dream, but it's also so different than I thought, but it's so amazing.
Yeah, dude, anyone that has not seen that, Look up what was it called again? It was the free skier. It was the road trip challenge or something like that.
Yeah, skier road trip challenge.
That dude, I am so glad I asked you about that because I knew it was the Nordica team, but I completely forgot that you were in it, and I I seriously think that's one of the most underrated pieces of ski media of all time. Like no one talks about it, and it is hilarious. That you should honestly watch it all these years later. It's so
Yeah.
good.
It'll be a good throwback.
Yeah, it's so good. All right, so that's our Nordica talk. So
Yeah.
we've basically made it 40 something minutes without mentioning the bunch once.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's crazy because like for people that don't know, you pretty much introduce Alex Hackle to the bunch guys, and now he like lives with them and is like in business with them. And yeah, so if you're wondering why Kieran's on, this is why. Like you have like a legitimate impact on skiing, apart from being like a regional legend.
Yeah. That's funny to talk about. Yeah. Yeah, the bunch, dude. I mean, I still think the bunch are like the sickest, and so I was thinking about this too because I figured it would come up, and I can't remember like exactly how I met those guys, but essentially it was like 2012, 2013 that year. I was living in Colorado, and like like every crew from Scandinavia at the time, they do their like couple months in the US living in Breck.
Yeah.
I think just like lapping Keystone and Breck, I ended up meeting those guys. And it's like I was already familiar with their work. Like in particular, like BMAC, he has like some of his older edits, like his edit called Soul Skiing. Have you ever seen it?
No, I don't believe so.
Oh, dude, it's like I haven't watched it in so long, but it'll like stand up today for sure. Like he's, like doing some insane jump tricks. And then, so like I already knew their skiing, and like I think it was the year after LSM had won Super Unknown, so everyone like kind of was like a little bit aware of the bunch. But yeah, essentially I just started skiing with those guys a bunch, and really started skiing with Maxie a bunch in Colorado, and then just like kept it going, and like went to Hood, and I was living at MHSSC, but I was skiing with those guys like every day as much as I could. And they're just like, I feel like it's not, no one doesn't know this now, but they're like a pretty special crew. And like at the time, like, they were just so like creative and like so open about skiing and such good homies too. That it was just a cool environment to ski in. It was like super fun, and everyone's just like pushing it all these different directions. And then I just, I got like a couple shots in Far Out, which was like their first, I think, like really big movie that got like a lot of good traction. And then the next year I did a few trips with them, or maybe just one like big trip. And like because that year I was in college, and I just essentially spent my whole winter break in Sweden skiing with those guys, which was sick. And that was just like a contrast of worlds. Yeah. And that was like, I don't want to say that was like it, but that's like the broad strokes of what it was. But I also think it's like, it's like history, right? Where it's like, you could say like, oh, Alex Hackle knows the bunch because I don't even know if I was the one that introduced them or not, but I was
like, yeah.
one of the closest connections. Or you could be like, that was like the flow of history, and it just happened to be me,
Like that was, yeah, exactly. That's what was meant to happen, and you were just the conduit that just happened to be there at the time.
Right. And if it hadn't been me, it would have been Cole Gibson or someone else.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, because I'm glad I didn't interrupt you, because in an interview with Magnus, he says So I'm reading from the interview now. He says, I first met Hackle in the spring at Mount Hood in 2014. Kieran McVeigh, who had been filming within Sweden earlier that year, brought Hackle over to our apartment in Govey. And he said, I knew of him because he saw some other edit. And then Kieran had shown Hackle a compilation of my finesse and less footy. And Hackle was more hyped on it than anyone. And it was big. And that was it. And yeah, like that was, and like you said, it was probably going to happen anyways.
Yeah.
But the force of the universe went through you and made that connection, and it's stamped in history now. Like you're the one that put him on and made that introduction.
Totally. Dude, I actually remember, like, I distinctly remember showing Hackle that, like, Magnus's, that cut he's talking about.
Yeah.
We were, me, Hackle, Gata, and I think Liam were on a urban trip in Quebec City. And we're all just like, you know, in some kind of crappy motel room. Although this motel had mirrors on the ceiling, which is always like a little weird.
Yeah.
But I was like in the bunch, like probably like the Facebook group or something of that time. You know, Magnus had put this cut up and I was like, oh, should we watch it? And they're all like, yeah, let's check this out. And we were all just like, oh my God, this is like so sick. Like we watched it and then we were just like dumbfounded. And I feel like that might have been the year before the year Magnus won Super Unknown, but it was like, I think it was a year after actually won Super Unknown. But it's like, you know, sometimes like you see videos come out and you kind of know this is going to be a big deal. And you're just kind of watching someone, you know, like almost transcend feels like a powerful word, but just like emerge into like really be doing something different. And I feel like that was what we all, you know, like watching that cut. Cause it was like mind-blowingly good in both like super gnarly, super creative, super stylish. But yes, I distinctly remember showing Hackle that cut, although I don't necessarily remember the exact time bringing him over to the Munch apartment in Gubby.
Yeah, that's so crazy, dude. Just yeah, you got front row seats to just the Bunch explosion, and
Totally.
and everyone talks about it the same way. They're like, honestly, everyone says they're like, when I like talking as them, they're like, when I first saw Magnus skiing, I knew it was something like incredible and different and special. Like everyone describes like seeing the Bunch for the first time as like this mind-blowing experience.
Totally. And I think like, I mean, I think it's a lot of those, like, I think that they, I guess, how am I trying to phrase this? I think over any individual one of them, it's like when you were first skiing with them all, it's weird because you don't want to like put them too much on a pedestal because you're like, they're just skiers having fun. But like that first year when I was skiing with those guys in Colorado, it just seemed like they were all on such the same like wavelength. Like it was like an artist commune or something, and they were
like
just
a hive mind. Like there's no individual; it's all just worker bees in the same hive.
No, actually, it's like a hive mind in that they're all in the same wavelength, but all in their own individual way.
It's so
and
weird.
Like they're all like pretty far out in their own way skiing, but they're all just feeding off each other in a super positive way. Dude, I think the other thing that obviously everyone knows like Hackle's an insane skier now, but Hackle's progression over like 1 or 2 years was insane. I think that because he went to Windell's Academy, I think, for like a couple years, somewhere in there. He went from being like, I think like a not very good park skier to like one of the best park skiers in the world. Probably like, I don't exactly know, but like probably could like barely do cork sevens to being like one of the first people, or maybe the first person to do a like triple 10 in like 2 or 3 years, which was just, it was mind blowing to watch that progression. And so that was another thing where it wasn't, you know, like seeing Hackle's progress. That was equally as mind blowing as anything I've seen in skiing. Going from being like, oh, it's like, you know, kind of like Grom, like ripping and progressing fast, to being like, oh, he's literally one of the best. Like that was the best switch 10 I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's so insane. And so, I mean, when you basically fell out of the scene because of injuries, did you just did you stay up to date on what was going on, or did like once your skiing cut off, did you cut everything else off?
No, I'm still like a lurker on new scores.
Yeah.
Like I don't really have Instagram, so I'm pretty out of the scene in that way.
Yeah.
But I've stayed lurking, you know, throughout college. So through like 2017, I was definitely lurking like almost every day on new scores.
So you saw the bunch just continue to like skyrocket. Yeah.
Totally.
So sick, dude. That's so sick. Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes me close to the end of everything I got. Like, is there anything else you want to talk about, dude? Like, I feel like we touched on a lot of the stuff that comes to mind for you. So yeah, anything cool. Left unsaid, you think?
One of the things I was thinking about a lot, like coming onto this podcast, is like, now it's like I'm in such a different phase of life. And I also always think about, you know, because like now I'm like training for a triathlon, and I'm not like super hardo stoked on it, but I'm pretty stoked on it. Like,
yeah.
But when I was 17, I was like, oh man, if I'm ever just running for fun, just like shoot me. That's so whack.
Yeah.
And so, but also I think that, and so I'm like trying to think about like almost like words of wisdom or something where it's like,
well, I mean, you've basically at this point had your full career arc. And a lot of people don't like see it at such a young age. So, you know, like you saw your rise, and now you're done with it. And now you're just like, now you're a 30-year-old old head, like just doing interviews talking about the good old days. But yeah, I guess I think it would be insightful if you could like just words of wisdom, if you want to call it that. That seems like grand, but like just spit some game to the younger kids who are like in their career where, like you said, like 2 injuries and you're like, oh yeah, I'm done skiing in this way pretty much forever. So yeah, I don't know if you have it queued up like that you've been sitting on for years, but.
Well, it's not like so grand, but I think it's just like, you know, when I think about the best times I ever had skiing, well, I think about 2 things that I think were super enlightening. One is like I got to have all these sick experiences, you know, like getting paid for to go to Sweden, or like free skate road trip challenge or whatever. But I'm like, literally the best times I had ever skied was like that winter of 2012, skiing with like Gata and Liam McKinley and PJ every day at Sugarbush. And so that was before, like, you know, I was sort of on the come up, but it was just like skiing with my friends, and that's always been the best part. And I feel like, you know, it's like everyone always says that, right? But it can't be said enough, where it's like literally whatever you're doing, just having fun with your friends is the best part. And then I think the other thing is, it's like, when I was younger, I remember like pushing so hard and like wanting so bad to be sponsored, and then wanting so bad to like be pro and make a little bit of money off skiing. And then it's like I signed my first pro contract, and it's like, I mean, you know, it's like you're not making anything. It's like you might get a couple $1,000s or whatever, I'm sure. Because I was never like really fully pro the way, but I don't know what the contracts are now. But it was like And I thought it was going to be like this big. And on one hand, it was so sick and I was so grateful. But on the other hand, I was like disappointed because I was like, oh, all the other things in life, like I'm still trying to figure out. Like at the time, I was like, oh, I'm like still trying to get a girlfriend and I'm not like immediately have like insane confidence or whatever. And so I feel like it's all this stuff where it's like, you know, the best parts of skiing are just like having fun with your friends. And that's the same with anything. And it's, you know, now that I don't really ski anymore, but it's still like one of my favorite things to do. I like go surf with my buddies, or for a while when I wasn't surfing, it was like go rock climb. And so it's just like when you get older, it gets so easy for those things to like come out of your life, because you just like when you're in college or high school, you have so much more free time, or just like in a couple years after high school or whatever, it's like eventually all the structure in your life starts pushing you away from doing those things, where it's like, oh, you got more responsibilities, like, or you have like a partner who maybe doesn't do all those things even if they're awesome. And so it's like you just have to keep making time for those things, and then they're still the best. And it's not like, yeah, I don't know. It's like you say the things like that, and I'm like, oh man, please don't put this in the podcast. It's so whack. But I also think it's one of the things where like it's really easy for that stuff to fade. And so like it, you know, for me, it's gone in cycles where it's like, you know, I'll end up surfing less, or I like won't have the thing. And then it's like, oh, I'll start skating more and be like at the skate park every day. Or it's like I'm taking like every opportunity I can to go surf. And then every time I come back to it, I'll be like, oh, damn, I missed this. And that's what I felt like Sugarbush felt like that kind of during the pandemic. Because and Talty would told me this. He's like, you know, everyone like kind of went away, and then the pandemic happened, and like they couldn't do the other things they did, so everyone came back to skiing, and it was like so fun. Yeah. And so I feel like that's, you know, that's what it's all about. And it's also like, I don't know what your average like listener is. I don't know if this is like a super in the industry podcast, or there's a bunch of like sort of average Joe skiers.
I think it's a bunch of regular people in their early 20s. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, you know, essentially you're always going to have the things that push you away from, or it just gets easier and easier to have those things that push you away. And it's like I don't structure my life around skiing or surfing the way I once did, but it's still, you know, it's still like a balance, and having those things is great. I mean, probably everyone knows that, but you have to like fight for it too. It's like a thing to think about as you make life decisions. Because I've made decisions where I'm like, oh, it'll be all right. Like, you know, I won't be able to like do X thing as much. And then like a year or two later, I'm like, oh damn, that was a mistake, because these are things I love to do. So I don't know if that's the cut, but that is something I think about all the time. And it's like being removed from my career, you know, more than anything, I'm just glad I have this thing I love to do, and I can still do it to some extent, or get like the same feeling surfing now than I did when I was a kid skiing.
Yeah, dude, that was a beautiful way to close it out. You want to give any shout outs? You want to plug anything before I let you go?
Oh, yeah, I can give some shout outs. Now I'm old and sentimental. Totally. Yeah. It's like, you know, I just think that, yeah, it's just like, I just have so much appreciation for so many people, but it's like everyone I've really like ever skied with a lot, you know, like the original Sugarbush crew, and that like even the people I like really grew up skiing with like super young. And that's like, you know, like Jeff DeForge, who was like I was skiing with when I was like middle school, Charlie Mayforth, and like Ben Kessler, Ryan Delmico, and like those are all, you know, like my friends from when I was a kid. But I hadn't had a chance to mention yet. And then also like all the people at like the Mount Hood Summer Ski Camp and all those guys I met at Hood, and yeah, just like all my friends over the years, skiing, but also just like making that so fun. And then also like, yeah, all the guys in the bunch, all the HG guys who like lived in Mammoth and Tall T. And then it's, yeah, now you start going on the list. You're like, I don't want to miss anyone, but just everyone that made skiing so fun for me, and just yeah, you know, all those guys. Like it was great.
Yeah, that's sick. All right, and are we gonna see a Kieran McVeigh edit anytime soon?
Dude, I was thinking about, because now that I'm 30, I'm like, maybe I can get that like opposite age claim. You know, like you see the like 13-year-old does X.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I could make like an all 8 edit, because were those a thing when you were in the scene?
Yo, dude, of course, yeah.
Like, so I'm like, maybe because I think I could still do that. So maybe I'll do a little one. I also had, you know, the other fantasy I had, but I won't. I don't think I'll do this. It's just like dropping an all backcountry booter edit with like a dub 10. And I just have to like train super hard on the trampoline for like, you know, a year or something. But that one's fully a fantasy.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate you accepting my LinkedIn request. I appreciate.
Oh yeah, of course. That's how you you know, once you're 30, that's your main social media.
Well, I'm glad I found you on there, and yeah, thank you again for coming on, dude. That was fun.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate it. Dude, have fun at X Games. I'm jealous. I've never been. It just seems like a great time.
Yeah, dude. Hell yeah, thank you.